Me on YouTube, if you're joining me on Facebook Live, and if you are joining me on Amazon Live, thank you for being here. Every day at noon, I like to share a book review because this is my way of being accountable to doing what I love, first of all, which is learning, and then to challenge myself as well to read a book. And so today was The Art of Learning by Priya Parker. I have to say, I was so pleasantly surprised with this book. I shouldn't have been surprised. Fred Gutierrez recommended this book to me. He is a friend of mine who I know I can trust his recommendations. And initially I thought, The Art of Gathering, what is that going to be about and what relevance does that have to to kind of this journey that I'm on of reading business books and motivational books. And I have to say, the relevance to this in the business world, in the motivational world, in the world of connection is absolutely brilliant. She speaks with very clear lines and inspiration. She shares this beautiful background of having a father from an American father, an Indian mother, beautiful mixed crazy background of like going 2 weeks to this house and then 2 weeks to that house. One is clearly very Christian, one's atheist, one's vegetarian, one is clearly not. I mean, it's, and she says, so it's no wonder that she actually became a facilitator, if you will. She is somebody who connects people, master of conflict resolution. I love it. So a master facilitator, strategic advisor, and author. She's the founder of Thrive Labs, and her work is so powerful. And I think now more than ever, I think I've been saying this like a broken record for the last several days, like now more than ever, right? Because on this new world that we live in, where we're working and sharing in different ways. So I'm just going to say hello if you're joining us on, I'm going to highlight it for you if you're joining us on Amazon Live, so you say hi there. And if you are joining us on Facebook, I'm going to say hello as well. And I'm just going to open up the chat there, so bear with me just one moment. And I'm going to say hello. Love that. All right. Hi, Joe. How are you? I hope your family's doing well. It's so nice of you to show up here with me. Love it. Love it, love it, love it. Thank you for being here. So today we're talking about, let me pop over on YouTube as well and see what I can navigate that space too. Okay, maybe I'll come back to YouTube. All right, here comes Dallas on cue, as usual. This is Dallas, my sweet little Havanese, and he loves to pop up here and join us as well. All right, so we're talking about the art of gathering, how we meet and why it matters. And I have to say, I think this book is so important because it shares how to make meetings, dinners, events special and unique and meaningful, and by doing that, memorable. So it, I think, deepens our connection in some way in the information that it has to share. Okay, let me see if I can get Dallas kind of situated. This is a little awkward, Dallas. This is it right on my lap. Okay, so let's begin at the beginning. So first of all, she, even just in the initial entry, she says, for my Anand, who shows me daily the meaning of awe and honoring. The meaning of awe and honoring. It's beautiful. Decide why you're really gathering. Close doors. Don't be a chill host. She gives a whole big lesson about not being hands-off, about being really involved with your guests. Create a temporary alternative world. It could be some kind of like a fantasy land that you create. Keep your best self out of my gathering. She doesn't want to do any one-upsmanship or, my career is bigger than your career kind of thing. And it really is inspiring what she shares. So first of all, she starts on, okay, Dallas, you can't lick my hand. She talks about any number of studies support the notion that it's obvious that much of the time we spend gathering with other people disappoints us, right? And even if it's just a neighbor stopping by, or I think of my good friend Karen in Nashville. Oh, she would make these amazing dinners. She would tell me that every dish had to have its own name, even if it was, pasta a la Karen. She would just make meetings an event, and not just meetings like business meetings like, oh, let me say hello to you as the kids are leaving school. Everything that had significance. She created an importance and a feeling of connection in so many ways, and I think this is what the book inspires us to do. So she says, as much as our gatherings disappoint us, we keep gathering in the same tired ways. Most of us remain on autopilot when we bring people together, following stale formulas, hoping that chemistry of a good meeting or conference or party will somehow take care of itself. She says that magic will emerge, right? When do we seek out gathering advice? We almost turn to those who are focused on the mechanics of the gathering. The chefs, the etiquette experts, the floral arrangers, the planner events. Here's what's so cool about this whole book. She says, by doing so, we inadvertently shrink a human challenge down to a logistical one. We reduce the question of what we do with people to a question of what we do about things. Isn't that crazy? And Joe, I know you can certainly attest to this in Dallas. My sister's been frozen over there, holed up in her house with electricity only every 20 minutes. My parents staying with her, my adult parents staying with my sister in her 40s and for a week. And it's a forced gathering, right? Even a forced gathering, I think, could create closeness and connection if we're present in thinking about it, if we're present in thinking, and this is of course just me assuming because I'm not frozen in, stuck in the house with freezing temperatures in Dallas, but I just was overlaying the situation that's happening there right now because I think, Joe, you just got your electricity back. So it's amazing to think that where we go for our gatherings when we don't have electricity, when we do have electricity, it comes back on to meet up on Facebook, to meet up on Amazon Live, to find a connection where we can, where we do. And I love that she says so many times we get lost in, what do the flowers look like, or what is the, what's the stuff, or what's the food. She says to think about what is the meaning, what's going to give it meaning. And I think about that. I was actually thinking quite a bit about that in this space of doing these book reviews. What is it about? For me, it's about learning. It's about taking on a new challenge. And it's about sharing about that challenge. It's about connection. And I'd love to know, too, referrals. What books would you like to know about? What books inspire you and why? And how could we share them in this space? And soon, very soon, I'm planning to invite authors in so that we can do shares and reads and interviews with authors as well, because there's just so many amazing teachers in our world. All right, so she goes on to say all the stuff of gatherings. We believe it to be so important and significant. All right, Dallas, you're going to have to go right. All right. She says, my job is to put the right people in the room and help them collectively think, dream, argue, heal, envision, trust, and the lens I want to share with you. She wants to take places and people and what happens between them to be the center of every gathering. I love that. Whether it's questions around the dinner table, or even last night when Darren and I went on date night, I picked up a book of question cards of, just things maybe we haven't discussed before. What's the best thing you've ever learned from your mother was one of the questions we were talking about last night. And you connect in a different way. Now that is my very simple example of something that she's doing here that is very, very beautiful and much more rich, if you will, than that. All right, so she goes on to say, she gives her background, her story. She says it was inevitable that she ended up in the field of conflict resolution with with her background. She says, after her parents' divorce, I moved every 2 weeks between my mother and father's household, toggling back and forth between a vegetarian, liberal incense-filled Buddha, Hindu, New Age universe and a meat-eating, conservative, twice-a-week, church-going, evangelical Christian realm. So it was perhaps inevitable that she ended up in the field of conflict resolution, right? I love that. Question. Oh, Eugene Francis, thank you so Maborang, thank you so much for following me on Amazon. It's great to have you here. Hello. Really nice to have you here. I'm so glad we're talking about The Art of Gathering, How We Meet and Why It Matters by Priya Parker today. All right, and Dallas wants back up here. So, hi Francis from Top A Rated. Oh, hi, nice to see you. I'm so glad that you're joining me. I appreciate your comments, and I'm going to just acknowledge you here rather than do a lot of typing. And I'm really glad that you're here. Let me just say thank you so much. And I love this interaction. Isn't this fun to be able to chat, to be able to talk, to be Dallas, give me 1 minute. To be able to be in this space with you. And if you have questions, if you have suggestions for books, I would love to share. I'd love to know what maybe you've read, what you found inspirational. I think we can create this space whatever we want it to be, right? So if you want to share favorite authors, I think last year I had the good fortune of interviewing some amazing authors, and I think that we're going to open up that format. So, oh, thank you so much, Eugene. He says you're doing great. Would you like to reach out? Yes, I'd love to do a collaboration with you with A-Rated. Absolutely. Oh, thank you. This is little Dallas, my little puppy Havanese. So, A-Rated, I would love to do a collab with you. Let's find each other. I'm on Facebook. I'm here in Amazon. I'm right now live on YouTube and Facebook Live as well. So definitely we'll find each other for sure. And let's talk, I love this. This is what gatherings are all about, right? To be able to connect with people in different places, in different areas through what we're doing here on Amazon Live. I love that we can find each other and that we can grow together and that we can collaborate and talk about interesting subjects and ideas and topics, right? Whether it's a product. I mean, I came to this space because I realized for the last 20-some years, I've sold all kinds of products, right? We hosted a today's special with the Roomba right here in my living room on Monday, like 24 hours of shows. And I realized that I could talk about any product, but what the product I love to talk about the most is ideas. And so I choose to talk about books because to me, that's the form of ideas and to share them in this space. So I'm really glad that you appreciate that as well and that you're here with me. So I love it. I want to say hello to Caitlin and all this. I'm just comfortable, the comfort of my home. We have, shoot me a DM for sure. The comfort. So my home is turned into a TV studio. So, Caitlin, I don't mind that you asked that at all. I'm accustomed to live television, and right now, what we're doing with live television in many different formats is it's broadcasting from home. So, in the television shopping world, that's kind of what I have become accustomed to. So I'm glad to answer that question. And at some point there is a convenience to it. In fact, because I'm not going into the studio, it's given me 2 to 3 hours back of my day every single day. And that's why I chose to actually do these book reviews, because I wanted to, instead of let that time waste away or let that time be dedicated to things that were less meaningful to me, I thought, okay, I'm going to use that time as a time to do something that matters, because I feel like reading books, reading inspirational books, sharing ideas matters to me. And Caitlin, I know I've seen you here before, so I know it matters to you too. So thank you for taking your time to be here. Yeah, I wish I could talk and type at the same time and do a book summary, but not so much. So thank you. Glad to answer those questions. All right, I just want to check in over on Facebook Live because we're over there as well. and say hello. And Joe is here. Thank you so much for joining. Love that you're joining us. George is here, and Hosnat, so glad to have you. So glad to have you joining us. All right, let's get to it. So The Art of Gathering. Again, a great book recommended to me by my friend Fred Gutierrez. Thank you, Fred. She says, in all my gatherings, whether a board meeting or a birthday party, I've come to believe that it is the way a group is gathered that determines what happens in it and how successful it is. So The Art of Gathering is part journey and part guidebook in this book. It's for anyone who has ever wondered how to make an ordinary moment with others and make it unforgettable and meaningful. Oh, I can wrote love. I love that, because that's what gathering is all about, right? To remember and cherish those moments. That's what life is, the collection of those moments. My hope is that this book will help you think differently about your gatherings. So she goes on in chapter after chapter to decide why you're really gathering. And she gives a really big challenge about why, like drilling down and down and down. And she says, you're not just having, to give an example, she says, the paradox of gathering, that there's so many reasons coming together that you need to have a bold, sharp purpose. So even a cookout in the backyard, she says, why would you be having that? Well, you want to, celebrate the end of the school year. But why? Well, because you want to get to know the neighbors. Why? Because you want to feel safer. Why? Because you want to create a connection among people. And she keeps going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper into whatever the event is. Why on a deeper level do you want to have it? What is the purpose of that event? And then she talks less about the things, the party decorations or the specific food. She's clearly not a party planner, but about what are the constraints? Are people going to be able to keep their cell phones? Can you demand as the rules of your party to put them away? And then she goes on to talk about etiquette as far as the pop-up rules coming in. She says, I'm just reading comments coming in, thank you. She says how you can create your own pop-up rules, because not everybody knows the norms, right, of a cotillion or of what's proper etiquette, but you could create your own rules, right, of what you want your party rules to look like. And she said that actually makes it safer and more friendly for people to come in to that gathering, because they're told right at the beginning, this is what we expect. And I thought that was really refreshing, because so many of us wonder, will they do this, do that, should I wear this, should I wear that? If you're given all of that ahead of time, then you come as prepared as any other party goer, so you're not intimidated, right? Or you're not wondering, is there something I'm missing that I should know about that I don't know about, that I need to pick up on the clues from other people about? She says, we don't examine the deeper assumptions behind why we gather, and we end up too quickly to replicating old formats of gathering, and we forego the possibility of creating something memorable, even transformative. I love that idea, transformative. So she says it's our purpose for this gathering to help people find business partners or clients. Is our purpose to talk about advice. What is it that we want to build? So each gathering, whether it is a friendly dinner with the neighbors next door, or whether it is a birthday party, maybe for my daughter, she says, what is it that you want to create there? How can you create that sense of connection? She says, when we gather, we often mistake conflating category with purpose. So true, right? What kind of birthday party is it? Oh, it's a Harry Potter birthday party. But that's not really the point. The point is, what do you want to do here? And then she goes on to share beautiful stories. There's so many stories. So she's interviewed, I think, over 100 different people and organizers in this book to talk about what it is that we could do to really change things. She gives an example of a judge who doesn't just dole out sentences, but actually his mission, if you will, his purpose in his gatherings, in his courtroom, is to improve behavior, not just say guilty, not guilty. Love that. I mean, that's powerful stuff, right? That's the stuff of life. And then she gives, more day-to-day examples about having a circle of women in our lives. She talks about a baby shower that was given, and they went to think about, why are we having this baby shower, and why does Dad have to be excluded? What if we created our own rules for the baby shower? What if for this baby shower it was about connection and parenting together? It wasn't just for the mom. And I know lots of people are making their own rules these ways, but I love that she's outlining it for us here in a real dialogue. Because at first, when I was suggested to me the art of gathering, I mean, I certainly took it from a viable source from my friend Fred, but I also thought, how can you fill this much, this many pages with real relevant information about gathering? And I should not prejudge, because there's so much in here about, again, creating connections and why and how, and in so many instances. So in the baby shower instance, it was about involving the dad, but not only involving the dad, but what do they want to incorporate as part of the party to recommit and dedicate themselves to their own marriage, their own union for in relationship to the baby. And then later on in the day for the baby shower, they have people come and they bring a symbol of their childhood, the guest's own childhood, to share a little bit about what it is that their journey is about when it comes to parenthood. Then there was a group of women who spoke to the pregnant mother and gave her inspirations of her own life. She was terrified for labor, and gave her instances in her own life of how she was strong and brave and powerful and filled with wonder. And I mean, I just got chills when I thought about redefining something as beautiful and heartwarming as a baby shower, but something like that seems so not typical, but you could assume what a baby shower would be, right? It's with games and with some pretty blue or yellow or pink decorations and a cake, but this was so much more personal and so much more meaningful. So there's example after example in the book of things like that, and I love that because it inspires us, right, to do more. So, all right, she goes on to say, perhaps you too have new needs and realities that don't fit the templates of gathering that you know. Perhaps you go with the flow and the old templates, hoping things will work out. And then she's inspiring us to do something that's unsettling, maybe for guests. Does it stick out your neck a little bit? Does it take a stand for the guest? Does it refuse to be everything for everyone? She says, go from, you want to dazzle. I love that. Dazzle. Specificity is a crucial ingredient. The more focused and particular a gathering is, the more narrowly it frames itself, and the more passion it arouses. Love that. So lots of, it sounds to me, from the work I've studied with Seth Godin, of throwbacks to many, many of his works that I hear here from resonating here about really diving in, digging deeper. What is it for? Who is it for? Why are you doing it? It was often the groups that were narrower and more specific. The more specific the group. And then she says, write a description of it. Write it out. Even if it is like she talks about Passover. Why is this night different than other nights? Why is this gathering different from all of my other gatherings? Why is it different from other people's gatherings? What is it that this gathering is not about? So again, distinctly looking for a purpose in the gathering. And then she says there has to be a decision filter. Is it for it? Will it do this? Is it for that? Is it? And then she goes on to talk about some practical tips. The lifelong relationship as new possibilities emerge. And she talks about classrooms, right? And how teachers are transforming themselves into what is it that I'm here to teach? What is it that I'm here to inspire in the students and bring out of them? And she gives various just different examples of that it's not necessarily about maybe what the teacher thought it was about to begin with. Maybe it's so much more, which I think is just fascinating. And the workplace is the worst place. Caitlin, it's so true, right? Because there's so many rules that are thrust upon us in the workplace, right? We can't always create our own in the workplace, which is really interesting when it comes to gathering. Yeah, if you're in the workplace and you're acclimating to new things. I know I did a Zoom call the other day. It wasn't Zoom, it was actually a format I hadn't done before, with 100 different people, and it's moving and it's scaling, and you're trying to keep up on the computer. It's a really different world we live in, right? I think that's why it's so crazy, because this book, I want to say it was 2018. So before all of us are transforming our homes into offices, right? Yeah, May of 2018. So really before all of this work that we are doing now from home, she was already writing about meeting and gathering and doing this kind of thing. So she says your purpose of your gathering is more than an inspiring concept. It is a tool, a filter that helps you determine all of the details, grand and trivial. So she says, make purpose your bouncer. What could it do? How could it make itself count? What is it for? How to make it memorable? How to create connection with people? I love that idea. So she says, goes on here, 2-minute exercises. She writes, what brought you to this city? Is it birth? Is it circumstance? She talks about beginning questions when somebody is beginning a gathering and having people talk amongst themselves and answer some questions amongst themselves, which I think is really lovely. And Caitlin says, it's awful, the workplace. Sometimes it can be, right? I hear you. Sometimes, and I think that's why we come to places like this, to have an alternative of where we can find something that isn't awful and connect together. And isn't it amazing that we can do that through the magic of virtual meetings like this? It's fascinating to me to be able to talk, to chat. Caitlin, I see you on your chat here, and want to say hello as well on Facebook and on YouTube. It's really, really amazing how we are able to connect in this space and be in this place together. And I want to just say thank you for being here on Facebook. I just see people coming in, and I'm just so grateful that you're joining me today. All right, close doors. Now she's going to talk about who the gathering is not for, which I think is important, because she goes on to say in the chapter, inviting people is easy, excluding people can be hard. The desire to keep doors open, to not offend, to maintain a future opportunity is a threat to gathering with a purpose. She says you have to close those doors to have that intimacy. She goes on to share a story, I think, with Seinfeld about how the room of the comedy club, if you will, is how it's set up and how it's staged, and how that sort of creates, she doesn't use the word ambiance, but how that creates the space for that magic to happen, that comedic magic to happen. And then she says, faced with people who should not, in theory, be there, but are hard to keep away, it can be easier and more generous to go with the flow. But the thoughtful gatherer understands that inclusion can in fact be uncharitable, and exclusion generous. The kindness of exclusion. So I think this is about not alienating anyone. I think she's talking about who is it really going to be meaningful for, and how can there be more meaning for the group. So she goes on to share a story about a small group of women who got together to do some working out. And one of the women, I think was 6 women, and one of them was going to be away. And so she was like, okay, let me just send my friend to go in my place because I'm not going to be there. And then the other people were uncomfortable with it because it wasn't part of the original 6. And it really was a story about that it wasn't a class, that they were there because they felt a sense of safety and connection, and that was their group, that was their tribe for that short period of time that they had dedicated to, I think 6 weeks. And it's a really interesting example because at first glance, exclusion seems like a bias of some sort or something that is inappropriate. But she really describes it in a way that, well, here you go. She says Barack Obama's aunt once told him, if everyone is family, no one is family. She said, by closing the door, you create the room. So it's just for a small space in time for that gathering to decide what works, what doesn't work. She goes on to say things like, it doesn't work for you to, have your cell phone, or to not have your cell phone, or to, the rules of that particular gathering, whatever it is. By the way, we're reviewing The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. If you are just joining on Facebook or on YouTube, want to say hello, and really glad that you're joining me and here today. And so happy to see you, Dean. Welcome in. Great to have you here. So as we dive back in, and Caitlin says, I love creating in my own space. Then if I decide to be around others, it will only be because of necessity or emergency. Totally get it, Caitlin. I totally get it. And it's so nice to have spaces like this that we can come to. We can do that. All right, as we move forward, how to exclude well. Who not only fits but helps fulfill the purpose of a gathering. I think about boundaries with Brene Brown. She talks quite a bit about this. She says, and not everybody wants to invite Bob to the party. Bob in marketing, the Bob down the street, the Bob. She kind of uses a funny little example there. The crux of excluding thoughtfully and intentionally is mustering the courage to keep away your Bobs, she says. So then she goes on. Why are you gathering? What is the underlying purpose? She talks about an example of observers being in a room and where she placed them just to create that room dynamic. And it actually made me think about a big project I'm going to be working on soon when it comes to jewelry. And it is, instead of presenting the jewelry and sort of showing features and benefits and details, they've asked me to style the jewelry, to do like a style fashion show. And I realized, the book for me couldn't have been better timing. I love the synchronicity of it, like the book we talked about yesterday, because I realized I didn't put enough thought into that project yet that I'm doing next week. Like, how could I style it? What kind of related to that project? Who really is it for? Who is it not for? It's not a young girl's jewelry line. There's no male jewelry that's in that line. And so as I'm conceptualizing the project, I'm thinking about it in terms of actually work projects as well, because that's a space that I'm gathering for that project. So really interesting, insightful questions. I never thought about this as I peer through that lens when it comes to work, or when it comes to even tomorrow night we're going on a double date with our friends Laura and Charlie, and now I'm rethinking our whole entire double date. Like what could we put constraint wise that could make it more exciting, when it comes to, I don't know, maybe making a certain dish, or maybe we have a certain theme, or maybe we all wear purple. I don't know. Come up with something like a little bit, they're really good friends of ours, so they play along, but I thought this book can be applicable in so many ways that are just very simple day-to-day kind of things that might just bring joy or make you laugh a little bit, do something a little bit off the beaten path. which, by the way, is my mantra after reading Jen Sincero's You Are a Badass, and also this week with Gabby Bernstein about The Universe Has Your Back. Both of those talk about go have fun. Go have fun. So when I think about overlaying that with the idea of the art of gathering, going and having fun and creating some interesting boundaries when it comes to gatherings, it's super creative, I think, and rewarding. So she talks about the matter of the size. If you're doing a group of 6, or if you're gathering a group of 12 or 15, I can imagine even now that could extend to Zoom groups or online groups. What is the space that you create there? And I know there's a number of follow-up videos that she's done. I perused through a couple of them this morning on this sort of thing. So then she talks about the venue where to have whatever event this is, the embodiment. She says we need to behave formally in courtrooms and boardrooms and palaces. We bring different sides of ourselves at the beach, to the park, to the nightclub. And she talks about the environment should serve the purpose. So that's super cool. Just thinking about the space that we're in and it's serving the purpose. She says, she goes on to cite a teacher who is teaching a class and to teach them that art truly happens when people participate in it was the goal, when people interact in it. I love that concept. The chateau principle she shares, it is, in its narrowest form, is this: don't host your meeting in a chateau if you don't want to remind the French of their greatness and of the fact that they don't need you after all. So choose your space wisely, I think, would be a very trivial interpretation there. And then she talks about displacing people, which is interesting language. Displacement is simply about breaking people out of their habits. It's about waking up people in the slumber of their own routines. Oh man, doesn't that sound refreshing, right? In these times right now when we're stuck in our homes and going fewer places. She gives this story about dinner, for example, generally thought of to have best on dry land. And then she cites this story from Patrick Lee Fermer. As the group was seated on the quay waiting for the meal to arrive in searing heat, Fermer and his 2 companions silently picked up their iron table for having an outside dining experience and carried it into the sea. They sat waist deep in the water, patiently awaiting service. When the waiter emerged from the restaurant, Fermer wrote, he gazed with surprise at the empty space on the quay, and then, observing us with a quickly masked flicker of pleasure, he stepped unhesitatingly into the sea with their dinners. I love that. The surrounding diners, amused at the spectacle, began to send the maritime diners wine in celebration of what they were doing. Not surprisingly, Fermer's New York Times obituary would note that his tables were reputed to be among the liveliest in Europe. I love that she cites that example, because it's not just about the gatherings of 6 or the gatherings of 12 or the 15 or the 100 or 150 that she cites. It's about even just a regular gathering where they just picked up the table and moved it over to the water, changing it up a little bit. I just find that to be so inspiring. So she says, again, it's about making your own parameters. She talks about the density, the metaphorical doors being open or closed in your purposeful gathering. She talks about how if there's leaky spaces, which is really interesting, almost like a feng shui term. She talks about going to a restaurant and there were the two tops, the square tables, and there was a party of 5, but they put together 2 and 2 and 2. And, so there's like 3 people on one side of the table and 2 people on the other side. And she said the conversation could never really get started through the evening because it was sort of this weird, like, the person in the middle of the 3 had to kind of go back and forth, and it just never flowed. So she says, just think about that in your gatherings. Love it. Love it. I just would never have conceptualized that before. It's fascinating to me, just fascinating. With family coming in very soon, they've just gotten their COVID test. I'm starting to think about this too, because I think that there's ways that we could apply this, right? Do you have family that is coming that maybe you haven't seen them in a while? I was just saying to Joe DeLuma, so glad that you're here, Joe. In Dallas, they've been, my sister, she's housing my parents who came to stay there because the electricity's only on for 20 minutes a day. It's freezing temperatures outside, and such an interesting time to even step back and to be like, okay, how are we going to put this one in the history books, right? Like, what are we going to do to make this a time that is, they're going to remember it, right? That a time that's worth remembering. I can remember one time being stuck in a Dallas airport, Dallas Love Field, with Julia, my au pair at the time, and Victoria, my daughter, was only 4 years old. And there were tornadoes that were coming through, and everyone at the airport had to go into tornado shelters underneath. And Julia, being from Germany, Ukraine originally, had no idea what was going on. And some people were sort of hysterical, some people were, you could just sense the heaviness. And I had this sense that we needed to stay calm in the moment, and in the moment we were okay. And the 3 of us, my 3-year-old and Julia, who was 20 at the time, and I just kind of like cocooned in our own little circle and played our little girl games and kind of did, if I'm going on a trip and in my suitcase, here's what I'm going to take. And I look back on that with all of that chaos going on around, and very valid. I mean, I don't mean to discount people being concerned about a tornado literally that was overhead at the airport. So much so there was the planes for many, many hours couldn't even take off because of all the hail damage. But somehow we were able to just be there and create that beautiful space of gathering. I just thought that we're not going to include that chaos of what's going on around us. We're just going to kind of stay in our own circles, which is what she talks about here, of boundaries. We put the electronics away so we could just be, together and not distracted. I guess there's just so many ways and illustrations of how you can create that in your own life. Her work is so great. Then she talks about not being a chill host. And I thought that it's so interesting, right? Because you kind of want to be, the cool host. Chill is selfishness disguised as kindness. Chill is selfishness disguised as kindness. That's such an interesting thought. Who wants to sail on a skipperless ship? Time and time again, she talks about whether it's a dinner party or whatever the case might be, that she advises people to own their power and lift a hand to the wheel. Time and time again, she says, they resist. So just want to say thank you, by the way, if you're jumping on here in Amazon Live, I see you. I'm very grateful that you are here with me. We're reviewing The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker, and it's so fascinating in so many different ways. In this chapter particularly, she talks about how hosts at parties of all sorts, dinner parties and beyond, tend to kind of stay aloof and keep things going, keep drinks poured or keep the food out, instead of exercising, she calls it exercising their power. She says this abdication often fails their guests rather than serves them. So the problem with chill is it isn't a host that lets people make their own fun, talk to whoever they want to. Isn't that a generous kind of host? And she says No, actually not. She gives a study. She says, authority is an ongoing commitment. Exercising your authority once and early on in the gathering is as effective as exercising your body once and early in your life. So she said, if you're going to have a gathering, you're going to have to be in charge of that gathering at the beginning, in the middle, at the end, all the time. That you are sort of driving the interaction and steering the wheel of what's happening there. So remember, if you're going to compel people to gather in a particular way, enforce it and rescue your guests if it fails. She says, and next time you're hosting a gathering, you feel tempted to abdicate even a little, examine the impulse. What is compelling you to hang back? If something logistical, like, you need to heat up the food or take a call, then assign that to somebody else that's there, she says. And then go and do something deeper. She says, often something deeper is at work if you're resisting it. A reluctance that you convince yourself is generous, like you're pretending that you're just being nice by letting people do whatever it is they want to. But she says, again, so many things. Wonders of generous authority, different kinds of gatherings. She goes on to say that protecting your guests is important at that dinner party, because if everyone knows the rules and maybe somebody's breaking the rules, be it just simple etiquette rules or be it just something else, she says that it's your job as the party thrower, as the gatherer, to get everybody back on track. She talks about a theater that has a no talking, no texting policy. She talks about equalizing your guests, and I loved this one. What if there was a gathering where nobody could talk about what they do in their work life? What if the relationship that happened among people was about ideas or topics or history or current affairs or something other than that? So there was no hierarchy, no difference in status, imagined or real. Say, for example, there was somebody that was a sales vice president and a new associate that was there. Obviously, that creates a dynamic, right? She says, what if you could get rid of those dynamics? Most gatherings benefit from guests leaving their titles and degrees at the door. So she talks about seating and sitting people in a room outside of what would normally be comfortable for them, kind of placing them in areas where they would have a different engagement than they might have expected. Again, the art of gathering is what we're reviewing right now. How we meet and why it matters. I love this book. All right, then she goes on to talk about perhaps creating a temporary alternative world if you wanted to be very creative with the work that you're doing. Again, she talks about rules. And so a lot of the book here goes into ideas and challenging beliefs, random knowledge of how old rich people want you to behave, sort of challenging norms and ideas. She talks about etiquette versus pop-up rules. And I thought that was really interesting because it becomes then so less intimidating to create a gathering and also to be an invitee of a gathering when you have pop-up rules, because the pop-up rules are given to you. So you don't have to think, like, oh, is this going to be formal? Is this going to be informal? Is this going to be, something that I have to come prepared to do? Or do I just show up? Should I bring something? Should I not bring something? So pop-up rules are the rules, whatever they are, that you assign to your own gathering. So it could literally be anything. So I really like that. Again, pop-up rules can actually democratize those who get together. She says, or get together, what could be less democratic than etiquette, which must be internalized for years before showing up at events? A rule requires no advanced preparation. Thus, someone who's just arrived at the country and is unfamiliar with maybe the culture, but is able to read an email, can fully be there without embarrassment and can partake in the rules-based gathering. So I really love that idea. So many good ideas. She talks about an original idea, an exploration that they went on almost by accident. My husband and I fell on a gathering format that created some magic almost every time we used it. The I Am Here days came to fruition out of an intentional idea, but their structure developed naturally, she says. Our constraints were natural ones, so it's about putting the constraints on there. What are they going to be? Choose an area that can be covered by foot. Invite a group of small enough to be able to sit together at a table for a single meal and take into account the weather. And then she says the original motivation had to do with exploration or discovery more than just being present together. So some ideas for this is, she says, she sent out the rules to the newcomers. If you're going to join an I Am Here day, then be here from start to finish. So it's a 10-hour day. Turn off all technology unless it relates to the day. Agree to be present and engaged in the group and what's going on. One conversation at meals and be game for anything. So those are the rules. It's like going on an adventure in your own space. I love that idea. It reminded me of going on like a tour group in Italy when you were going into that space and that gathering, that tour group with that guide. She gives you the rules, or he gives you the rules, and that's what you agree to do, because that's how the group moves through that time and space. And it's so true. Then it creates that space for you to stand in awe when you see the structure of David, or driving in the countryside, because nobody's blaring their loud music, because that's one of the rules, that you cannot do that. I mean, it really is a beautiful articulation of things that are oftentimes just unspoken and maybe unheard, unthought of, not thought through, if you will. And I just can't wait to implement this one. I mean, I just think that my family's going to be in for a real treat, especially with extended family coming to visit, because now we can create boundaries and rules and say, okay, let's talk about this. Let's not do this tonight. Let's sit at the table and leave that behind. And okay, tonight we're not going to have any, boyfriends, girlfriends over, or whatever the case is, to create whatever's the goal of that connection. Just love that. Let's hope Darren's on board with me. And then she goes on to talk about power and being humble and being inclusive. And then so many more specifics when it comes to particular gatherings, how a gathering is a social contract. And naming also sets the tone of it. Passageways and doorways sort of setting up where the energy flows throughout. The cold open, how to kind of warm up the people that you're gathering together and help them gel. I love this. And I love this too in this space. It's giving me ideas for, maybe the way we open this up is to write in the chat books that you have either read that are fantastically interesting, or books that you would recommend to me so that I can share them in this space, preferably related to business or some type of self-motivation, some kind of giving back, or something like this that kind of crosses the line in a lot of different ways. I think this is a book that unexpectedly, for me, I wasn't sure exactly what this was going to mean or where it was going to fall into my zone of reading books, and I'm super pleasantly surprised. All right. The dark theme, she talks about different themes that you could have. So there's a lot more toward the end of the book where I think there are examples. She talks about putting a hard out on that time to close that time together as well, so that people know and there's not lingerers, as we all know at parties, and somebody, doesn't know how long to stay, doesn't know how long to go. I think that's a really interesting way to finish things off. And then she also has suggestions in the back. So Priya Parker, The Art of Gathering. This is a book that is about how we gather, how we can make it more meaningful, how to create that in a way that is creating connection. And I highly recommend this book. I totally undervalued what I thought I would get out of it. And I have a feeling this is going to be one that I return to time and time again. So if you are joining me on Amazon Live, it is in the carousel. I'll make sure that I've highlighted it for you in the carousel. And I want to say thank you for being here. I see how busy it is, and I'm so grateful to you to be here and to chat with me, Caitlin, and new followers coming in, Eugene Francis, Natalie, top rated. So glad that you're top rated. So glad that you stopped in here and spent some time with me as well as on Facebook Live and on YouTube as well. Really grateful for you to be here. All right, so The Art of Gathering, read it, love it, by Priya Parker. I hope you enjoy it. And I'm signing off for today. I'll see you back tomorrow with another book review, same place, same time, noon Eastern, right here. We'll see you then.